Hi, folks. Hello. Thank you so much for coming out. It's amazing to see so many people out here. My name is Carmen Aguirre. I am a theater, thank you. I am a theater artist and author, and I am here to welcome you today on behalf of the Institute for the Humanities at Simon Fraser University. We are so excited to co-host and co-sponsor this important, meaningful, and crucial discussion. I'd like to express gratitude to the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations for letting me grow, heal, work, live, and raise my son on these unceded territories. I am from Chile. I was raised in exile here. My relationship to these lands is not about displacing or colonizing others. I am not a settler. I am a visitor. I'd like to acknowledge that this country was built with the exploited labor of working people from Europe and the global South. The violent extraction of land, resources, bodies, and surplus value are the conditions for the possibility of what we today know as Canada. I'd like to provide a bit of local context as it pertains to today's conversation. 4 years ago, in anticipation of Freedom to Read Week, I organized a panel here in Vancouver called Freedom of Speech in the Arts, Voices from the Left. I was compelled to do so because I had noticed a troubling trend of cancel culture, which I call purging, taking hold in the Canadian theater industry. I was finally galvanized to do something about it when a veteran queer theater artist's play reading, which was to have taken place at the publicly funded Toronto Theatre he had co-funded and run for over a decade, was canceled. He had run this theater company at great personal cost, facing credible death threats from the Christian right in the 80s and 90s for the programming of his seasons. He famously met his enemies in the theater lobby in full drag. His crime that led to the cancellation of his reading was to write 2 provocative postings on his own blog page, criticizing the title and content of a book written by a trans woman. This was not an isolated event, but part of a greater climate of fear, censorship, and self-censorship involving what I call the privatization of tyranny, because it is not ordered or overseen by the state. He came out to Vancouver for the panel and asked me if I could provide security because he was afraid for his physical safety after he had been mobbed, dehumanized, and exiled from the theater industry. Joining him on the panel were then chair of the Trans Alliance Society of BC and then vice president of the BC NDP, Morrigan, the director of the Institute for the Humanities at SFU, Samir Gandesha, then policy director of the British Columbia Civil Liberties Association, lawyer Michael Vaughan, and actor, playwright, and director Omari Newton. I moderated. The event was packed, broadcast live on Co-op Radio, and live streamed. I had to organize this event on my own because nobody would organize it with me. Nobody. Folks expressed their desire to co-organize, but their fear of they themselves being canceled stopped them. Their fear was real and justified. Theater folks threatened fellow theater companies that they would publicly accuse them of transphobia if they hosted the panel. Never mind that the then chair of the Trans Alliance Society of BC was on the panel. I wish I could say this climate has changed, but I'm not sure it has, which is why tonight's conversation is so important. This kind of conversation in the face of cancel culture is the opposite of purging. It's a strengthening exercise. It's public discourse as public service. It's akin to direct action. It's an act of solidarity, which is collective power, and I applaud the bravery of everyone in this room for being here. Samir Gandesha, the director of the Institute for the Humanities at SFU, could not be here in person tonight, but sent along some words for me to share. Here they are. On behalf of the Institute for the Humanities, I would like to extend a warm May Day welcome to you all to this vitally important discussion of cancel culture, or what hosts Jay and Clementine call the Nexus. I'm very disappointed not to be able to participate in the discussion this evening, as I have written on many of the themes that will no doubt be addressed tonight. For those who are interested, these pieces can be found on the Open Democracy website. Of course, much has been said from the right about cancel culture, and indeed the term may have originated there, but that hardly means that it doesn't effectively describe something very real, and I would add, something extremely destructive for solidarity on the left. Since becoming involved with the Institute for the Humanities when I first arrived at SFU in 2004, and especially since I became director in 2010, I have witnessed firsthand the corrosive effects of cancel culture in the university. I have also seen it firsthand in an anti-racist organization I helped to found a couple of years ago. I've seen it in attempts to close down a women's library. I've seen it in claims that a photo exhibition depicting several forms of settler colonialism created an unsafe space for Jewish students. I've seen it in the claim that critical feminist Laura Kipnis was a rape apologist. I've seen it in threats by mining companies to complain to the Board of Governors about programming we did on the ill effects of Canadian mining companies' operations in Greece and Central America. I've seen it most recently in the recent decapitation of a statue of that not unambivalent advocate of nonviolence, Mohandas K. Gandhi, on SFU's Burnaby campus. Most tragically, I've seen it in the cancellation of a Marxist Chinese-Canadian student of mine who did important work combating the scourge of gentrification in Chinatown that was displacing many poor elders in her community. Her sin? She liked or retweeted the wrong tweet. The work that we do as academics in our research and in our classrooms is simply not possible without an open space for debate and discourse, disagreement, and dissensus. Is it possible to entirely avoid giving offense in such a context? The answer must be a resounding no. Can one imagine discussing, for example, the question of Palestine without someone being offended? The same could be said about the war in Ukraine and countless other examples. Does this mean that speech that one finds to be offensive is harmful? Again, a resounding no. This is perhaps even more the case with respect to serious works of art and literature, which are always testing and expanding the boundaries of the sayable and the unsayable. As one critic has formulated it, today's avant-garde is tomorrow's kitsch. What can seem to us today to be offensive becomes ordinary and banal tomorrow. So being able to bear offense without construing this as harmful is one of the key preconditions of living and participating in a democratic society, whether this be the current deformed liberal democracy or a future socialist democracy, which we must struggle to bring about in the future. Yes. I would like to make one announcement, and that is that soon we will be releasing the program for our 40th anniversary conference, scheduled for this October 27th, 29th, entitled Apocalyptic Anxieties. I'm very excited to say that the keynotes are Marina da Silva, Brazil's Minister for Environment and Climate Change, and the brilliant Franz Fanon scholar, Louis Gordon. I would like to thank the panelists for being here, and especially to Davina for organizing this important event. I also would like to thank Huyen Pham and Wallace Hartley for all the work they do at the Institute. If you would like to know more about our programming and events, please consider signing up to our mailing list if you haven't already done so on our website. I hope you enjoy the panel. So thank you, Samir, for your words. And now I would like to pass it over to our moderator, Tom Kemple. There you are.
Hello, everyone. My name is Tom Kemple. I'm a professor of social and cultural theory at the University of British Columbia. So I'm here at the invitation of Samir Gandesha from the Humanities Institute at SFU, who you heard is not able to be here. My role is moderator today. Not that we don't expect radical ideas, but hopefully not polarizing and extreme ideas. but ones that we can engage with and discuss. I'll be a bit briefer than the others so that we have lots of time to hear our main event, Tara and Clementine and Jay. I'm getting lots of credit tonight from my niece in Vermont because I'm with this distinguished company. I'm not someone who has ever been canceled. I've been trolled, but not canceled. My experience on social media is extremely limited. I have a minimal presence on Facebook and zero presence in other platforms. But I really, really appreciate the formulation that the, okay, I'll just say it. I don't usually say this out loud. Fucking canceled podcast has formulated in terms of what they call the nexus. And when I listened to especially the opening podcast and a few of the others and read some of the notes and some of the descriptions, I was trying to think what kind of theoretical or conceptual purchase or perspective could we get on this? So if we think of the nexus as I don't want to say intersection, but the conjunction of social media, cancel culture, and identity politics, I think there is a contribution that academic thought, academic freedom can offer to this. If we think of social media largely through the coordination and control and ownership of big tech, then we know that we're also talking about the larger context of surveillance capitalism. So I recommend the work of Shoshana Zuboff on that. If we think of cancel culture as a degradation and a compromising and a restricting of our public spheres, right, including our ability to engage and talk and think autonomously and independently, I recommend even the older work of Jürgen Habermas to think about how our public spheres are continuously being colonized by the reaction economy. And then finally, if we think of identity politics as a way of engaging, of reducing who we are in terms of mere standpoints or simple positionalities rather than full complex persons, then we know that that identity politics is often an engagement or an attempt for recognition at the expense of other kinds of political questions of representation or economic questions of redistribution. So I think there's a lot of ways that we can begin to really keep thinking about this great formulation of these three dimensions of the nexus. So I'm going to leave things there, and I'm going to ask Sarah to come up and give us another perspective on our theme tonight. Thank you.
Just do this. Hey, hi. All right, is that working? Okay, so truth be told, up until about 45 minutes ago, I was under the impression that the structure was going to be a panel. So now I have my own lived experience in a panic attack, and I can relate to my clients really well. So I appreciate, I hear some anxious people out there like, oh my God, I'm so glad it's not me. My name is Sarah Blackmore. I'm here because I'm a registered clinical counselor. Davina asked me to speak tonight on the sort of mental health impacts of cancel culture. So I just recently launched my own private practice called North Talk. I offer in-person counseling in Vancouver and virtual counseling for those across the province. I'm not an expert in cancel culture, but I've a vested interest, and I've sort of done my own education, listening to a lot of fucking canceled to learn more, because I've supported a couple of clients who have been canceled, and also I'd say the vast majority of my clients are kind of more in that bystander sphere, where they really struggle with the fear and hypervigilance of, what if I make a mistake? I don't want to do anything wrong. And so they feel so disenfranchised and silenced and stuck. And so the way I kind of structured my talk in the last 10 minutes was to just sort of think, I was kind of reflecting back. There's really great episodes with Dr. Paredes and Dr. Christine Marie. And so I was just sort of thinking about, from a mental health standpoint, why is cancel culture so harmful? And Tom and I were just sort of talking about, he was saying, I haven't experienced cancel culture, but we used to call it bullying. Well, essentially, why cancel culture is so harmful is it's bullying on a massive magnitude, on a magnitude that we have no capacity to cope with, because as humans, as social beings, we're maybe meant to withstand sort of being ostracized by a group of people, maybe about the size in this room, but not by hundreds, thousands, millions, potentially more people. And what I've seen in my experience in supporting clients who've been canceled is, first of all, it's traumatic. You won't find it in the DSM. It's not there yet. I've done a lot of sort of consulting and supervising and talking with a lot of other counselors, and I'm like, where do you stand on cancel culture? How do you support your clients? And a lot of people don't really have much to say. So my experience so far is there's not a lot of mental health professionals who are very familiar with it or know how to support clients who've been through it. But if you sort of strip back cancel culture and you think about it from a bullying lens, the piece that I think is most harmful for individuals is how it impacts your internalized beliefs about yourself. And this is what I found to be most devastating. So some of us have internalized beliefs that we're inherently bad people. A lot of times, if there's childhood trauma, attachment trauma, those beliefs form then. And why that happens is because when you're young and you're experiencing abuse or trauma, children are great. I have a toddler, she's wonderful, but they're kind of like little narcissists. Like, they think the world revolves around them and they only think about themselves. And so when you're a young child and you experience abuse, harm, or neglect, your way of making sense of it is, it must be my fault. Because you don't have the capacity to recognize that you could be hurt, not because it's your fault. And it's also a way that you help find control. It's really scary to think that you exist in the world and you have no control over your actions or other people's actions. So what you do is you blame yourself. It's a way to have an answer, a concrete answer, and it's a way to feel like you have control. And you think, if I'm just better, then maybe this won't happen. But that's very problematic because it's no child's fault, when they're harmed or abused. But that belief sort of gets ingrained. It sort of gets stuck in our systems. And then if you grow up over time, what happens is that can be exacerbated in relationships. You don't believe that you're good enough. You don't go for opportunities. You hold yourself back. And then if we just extrapolate that out to someone who experiences cancellation, you're now being told on this massive scale that you are a bad person. And I think the thing to really take seriously and not lightly is that the extrapolated impacts of someone being canceled can be suicide. It can very quickly get there, because if you are operating on an internalized belief that you're bad, that's just been validated on a massive scale, you don't have any hope anymore. And we need social connections and social relationships to live. And so if that is stripped away, it's so harmful to that individual person that they find a way of taking control and ending their pain by potentially ending their life. And so it's really important that we take seriously, it's not just about being shamed publicly, but this could have a severe impact on someone's mental health well-being and their life. And also for bystanders, so I mentioned this before, You have the person who's been canceled potentially, but the people around who are maybe watching this, who maybe aren't engaging in it, who are not unfollowing or hopping on the cancellation bandwagon, they're now living in this hypervigilance. So what I see with what I would call clients who are sort of in that bystander realm is increased hypervigilance. So monitoring themselves, their actions, their words, where they go, what they say, what they do. And then if they get it wrong, even in the slightest, just demoralizing and blaming themselves and shaming themselves. And so that's gonna really limit their growth and their opportunities. And then if we think about from the canceller, right, I firmly believe that it's really harmful to sort of build up your sense of power by degrading others. Because it's kind of like when we chase goals, we get there and then we realize it's not good enough. We want the next, and we want more, and we want more. And so maybe you get a fleeting sense of gratification, maybe, but it is gonna be fleeting and it's gonna lead to frustration. So from that mental health perspective, I really think cancel culture is harmful for sort of everyone involved. And then I was just thinking about, in the podcast with Dr. Paredes and Dr. Christine Marie, Clementine and Jay ask, so what do you, for those who've been canceled or those are cancelers, like, how do they recover? What does that look like? So I thought I would just speak a little bit to that. I would say, what happened with me is I was asked by some clients, where do you stand on cancel culture, and are you willing to listen to this podcast, Fucking Canceled, and learn? And that was the first time that I'd was really confronted with, where do I stand? And so I said, I don't believe in it, but I need to learn more. So I'm gonna listen to the podcast. I wanna learn more, and I'll get back to you. And I was listening to the podcast, kind of like starting from the beginning, really immersing myself. It became clear to me that it's not enough to be against cancel culture, just like it's not enough to be against racism. I firmly believe that all mental health professionals should be anti-cancel culture, actively against the harmful system that cancel culture is. And I really encourage folks to ask counselors where they stand on important issues to them. So we're taught this really annoying thing in grad school to not answer questions directly. Early on in my career, I had a prospective client ask how old I was, and I was like, oh my God, like I need to be old and professional, and we're sort of, like, I can see that you wanna know how old I am. Yeah, tell me, and it's like, for God's sake, sometimes you just need to answer the questions. So I've had to do some unlearning of grad school and realize that actually one of my personal values is transparency. And the #1 predictor of client outcome success in counseling, the most important thing is a strong alliance between the client and the counselor. It predicts positive outcome successes more than the modalities and theories used, more than the type of professional. And so if you don't feel safe with your counselor and you don't know where they stand on something that's really important to you, like cancel culture, ask. I encourage you, you're allowed to ask them where they stand on that. And if you don't like the answer, that's okay, you're allowed to find someone else. So when you think about finding a counselor, and if they give you that like, I can see, let's move on. You're allowed to get a clear answer and not have to pay for that answer. So I really encourage you to do complimentary phone consultations with any counselor and get a sense of how you feel about them and how you feel about their approach. I also, looking at my scribbly notes. When it comes to like how to recover, so the way that I sort of conceptualize cancel culture being canceled is really through a trauma lens, as I mentioned. You won't find it mentioned anywhere sort of diagnostically, but if you think about the criteria of trauma, an emotionally or physically disturbing event in which you don't have the capacity to cope with, basically that's what being canceled is. And so the approach to that is always first like safety, and in this case I would think about safety like your emotional well-being. Like, do you need to get off of social media for a little while, right? Do you need to put boundaries on certain relationships and keep other folks close to you, folks that know you well, that you won't sort of get caught up, am I bad? Did I do a bad thing? You need to have people close to who know you well and you trust. Sort of emotion regulation strategies. So obviously you're going to be experiencing, sort of hyperarousal, states of anxiety, potentially hypoarousal, depressiveness, low mood, hopelessness. And then to really sort of build out your own narrative and remind yourself of what your narrative is, like that you are not this bad person. And I would say that's the part where that can get the most sticky or the most stuck for clients. Especially if the roots of that belief were seeded early on in life and it's been exacerbated later on. And so one of the modalities I think that can be really helpful for that is EMDR. It's used in a lot of sort of trauma processing work. And that's just to really try to unstick that belief about self, because as long as you're holding on to that belief, you're going to be filtering the world and your experiences through that belief, and it's going to keep you really trapped. Another modality that I think can be really effective here is acceptance and commitment therapy, sort of more well known as CBT or cognitive behavior therapy. But what I really like about ACT is it talks about this idea of focusing on what's within your control and letting go of what's out of your control. Much easier said than done. So a lot of us get caught up in what ACT would call unworkable control strategies, and that might be like you want to control what everyone thinks about you and how everyone sees you, and we can't do that. We cannot control other people's thoughts, and from an ACT perspective, we're going to waste a lot of energy and effort in trying to control all these things that are out of our control, and inevitably, when those things crash and burn, we're going to be exasperated. So it talks about this idea that, like, if only 10% is within your control, what are you going to choose to do with that 10%? And to accept, which doesn't mean that you like it or that it's okay, but that you actively acknowledge what's out of your control so you don't get caught up expending energy and effort in that area because it's unworkable. So maybe what's in your control is, who has your phone number, who you want to hang out with, what you want to do in your free time, but what's out of your control might be the narrative that's happening online, or maybe you want to take control and write your own narrative. So the other piece is that I really like about ACT is talks about taking value-guided action. So this means that the behaviors and actions we choose, if they're in alignment with our values, we're going to feel more fulfilled. What I really like about this lens is it doesn't sort of pathologize, like you can have bipolar, you can have anxiety. You don't have to get rid of those things or have them under control to have a fulfilling life. You can have strategies and tools to help you cope with those difficulties and take value-guided action. So live a life that's in alignment with your values, because oftentimes for being canceled, for example, if you are so focused on trying to control what people think about you or getting your story out there, or that's going to take over your life, and you're probably not going to be doing the things that are really meaningful and important to you, and so you're expending all this energy and effort. It's like running on a hamster wheel, and you're running faster and faster and faster, and what you need to do is you need to get out, and you need to go, wait a second, what's really important here? So I'll just end with one thing, an industry secret that you're not going to like, but no matter how much therapy you do, and no matter the best modalities, evidence-based strategies that your therapist uses, therapy will not change other people. So if you're coming to therapy, please have the willingness to make the changes yourself. It doesn't mean you're okay with what other people do, but you're changing your relationship to the situation or changing your relationship to other people, because in the end, we can't change anyone else. Thank you. And I believe Kier is coming up, and they're much more prepared than I am.
Happy May Day. I spent 5 years of my life dedicated to a social justice orthodoxy that reduced people to their identities and decided how good or bad, how worthy or unworthy people were based on those labels. People with multiple marginalized identities, such as women of color, were put on a pedestal, and others, such as white men, were treated as though they were personally responsible for everything that was wrong in the world. Everyone had certain roles to play. People of color were expected to be outgoing, expressive, and confrontational, to bear their hardships for everyone to see, and to connect with their cultural backgrounds in a public way. White people were expected to be quiet and submissive, to hold back from sharing explanations or dissenting thoughts, and to defer to the leadership of various charismatic people of color. People who fell outside of such parameters, regardless of skin color, were regularly accused of white supremacy. This structure never sat well with me, but for a long time, I convinced myself it was because of my white fragility. Discomfort is a sign of growth, I was told over and over again. So I got used to being uncomfortable, to hearing insulting and degrading comments on a regular basis, to watching people's humanity get trampled over and over again. I convinced myself that this was all for the greater good, even though I wasn't sure how that could be. The terrain of what was right and what was wrong was constantly shifting under my feet. I found myself parroting slogans, not because I believed in them, but because I was worried people would think I was a bad person if I didn't. I watched people lose their entire community over mild mistakes or misunderstandings. I watched vengeful, unstable people with the correct identities behave terribly, and I watched as not a single person, myself included, stood up to them. It was safer to keep your head down and hope you wouldn't get caught in the crossfire than it was to put a target on your back. So we allowed this destructive behavior to run rampant through our scenes. I participated in an accountability process that was anything but, that demonized a person for experiencing normal levels of relational conflict, that stripped them of their community and their friends, deemed their new partner guilty by association, forced them to move out of the city, and resulted in a diagnosis of post-traumatic stress disorder, all under the banner of believing women and supporting survivors. Slowly but surely, doubt started to creep into my mind. I'd been told that we were building a new world, breaking ground and not relying on the legal system to deal with conflict. And yet this new world disposed of crucial safeguards, such as the requirement of evidence and the principle of innocent until proven guilty. This new world seemed to be a resurgence of vigilante justice with some extra bureaucracy sprinkled on top. And the kangaroo court cases just kept piling up. Deciding to leave this subculture was not easy. Social justice orthodoxy likes to pretend that it is the only true left, and that if you're not loyal, you must be right-wing. Over time, I realized that it was possible to separate out the largely symbolic and representational politics of social justice culture from material leftism, policies such as high corporate and wealth taxes, a robust social safety net, and well-funded public health, education, and transit systems. I could reject the former while continuing to fight for the latter. When I was ready to publicly announce my leaving, I did so by publishing a series of essays online. I braced myself for blowback, but the overwhelming majority of messages I received were supportive, from people who had left the subculture silently. I was happy to see so many people rejoining the larger world, but it was glaring how few people felt comfortable declaring out loud that they were leaving, even just in a comment on my newsletter. It made me realize that I wasn't the only one who felt deeply alone in my deprogramming process. When I first left, I struggled a lot with residual paranoia. I knew I wasn't a bad person for leaving, but I had plenty of intrusive thoughts to the contrary. It took time for the frequency and intensity of those to go down, and there were times where I asked for reassurance from my friends and partner that I wasn't a bad person for considering and adopting new perspectives. Dropping the bad-good binary was crucial to changing my state of mind. I decided that I would never be the best or the worst person on earth, that I was a normal person who was trying my best, and that my missteps didn't make me a monster. I stopped holding myself to impossible standards of purity of thought and action. Sometimes I even had shivers of pleasure after thinking a previously forbidden thought. My mind was waking up again, and it felt so good. Another challenge in leaving was that all of my close friends remained in the subculture. I was too frightened of being labeled a traitor to talk about my rising doubts in those friendships, although I did dip my toes in here and there. What was ultimately the most helpful was making new friendships outside of the subculture altogether. This gave me an opportunity to practice speaking my mind freely, and learning that these new friends didn't just tolerate but actually wanted to discuss the ideas I was grappling with was a revelation. The more I did this, the less anxiety accompanied it, and the more I could relax into these connections. Then, when it was time to publish my essays, I knew I wouldn't lose everyone. The first time I walked into a library after leaving the subculture, my heart was racing. It was as if I were entering it for the first time. There was not a single book in there that was off limits to me. I'd thrown my ever-growing list of problematic writers in the trash can. Walking out with the coddling of the American mind tucked under my arm, I felt the rush I used to get when I was shoplifting. I honestly felt like someone was going to jump out of a bush and accuse me of treason. But nobody did. I got home and devoured it. It's a truly beautiful thing to no longer be scared of new ideas, to in fact seek out different perspectives in order to see if my own hold water, and to grant myself the freedom of changing my mind. One massive change in my life was when I realized I was not responsible for other people's reactions. If someone wanted to massively distort what I said, there was nothing I could do about it. Same for putting words in my mouth or attacking my character rather than my ideas. My job is to write out my ideas as clearly as I can. What happens after that is beyond my control. This has been an incredible relief, and it has allowed me to begin writing again after many years of silence. It used to drive me absolutely crazy that other people didn't think, speak, and act as I did, and a lot of my life force went toward trying to make this happen. I was so convinced that I was right about everything, that people who disagreed weren't just wrong, they were harmful and even dangerous. What a sad, small world I was living in. What an incredible diversity of human thought and opinion I was missing out on. The subculture is where curiosity goes to die, and reviving it, taking a renewed interest in the world around me in all of its beautiful complexity is something I can't recommend enough. It's allowing me to treat others with the full humanity they deserve, instead of relying on stereotypes. It's giving me practice in using persuasion rather than shame to change minds. Most of all, I can once again see the incredible work that countless generations have put in toward providing for the material needs and the human rights of all people, regardless of the forces that have tried to divide us. In other words, what I have found again is hope. My wish is that this nominally leftist subculture, with its inverted hierarchies and indifference towards material issues, will fade in influence as more and more people realize that vengeance is not politics, that dividing the working class along identity lines only benefits the ruling class, and that nothing is as powerful as good old-fashioned solidarity. Thank you. And now, in celebration of May Day, I would love to sing an old labor song. Feel free to stomp, hum, or sing along. Well, I went down to the rich man's house, and I took back what he stole from me, and I took back my dignity, and I took back my humanity. Now I went down to the rich man's house, and I took back what he stole from me, and I took back my dignity, and I took back my humanity. Now he's under my feet, under my feet, under my feet, under my feet. No more's he gonna walk all over me. Well, I went down to my landlord's house and I took back what he stole from me, and I took back my dignity, and I took back my humanity. Well, I went down to my landlord's house and I took back what he stole from me, and I took back my dignity, and I took back my humanity. Now he's under my feet, under my feet, under my feet, under my feet. No more's he gonna walk all over me. Well, I went down to my boss's house and I took back what he stole from me, and I took back my dignity, and I took back my humanity. Well, I went down to my boss's house and I took back what he stole from me, and I took back my dignity, and I took back my humanity. Now he's under my feet, under my feet, under my feet, under my feet. No more's he gonna walk all over me. 'Cause he's under my feet, under my feet, under my feet, under my feet. No more's he gonna walk all over me.
Thank you. Wonderful start. That was our warm-up. We have a 10-minute break now. There's merch over there. Unfortunately, my t-shirt, which is the ghost of Karl Marx, was not up for sale. There's also drinks in the back, so please mix and mingle, and we'll see you in 10 minutes. Okay, can you take your seats? All right. Of course, if you need to get up and stretch or grab another drink or step outside for whatever reason, that's totally fine. So here's the main event. We have our three main speakers. They'll speak for about 15 minutes or so. We're going to start with Tara, and then Clementine, and then Jay. And then we'll have some time for some discussion and some Q&A or whatever else we have time for. So Tara, let's hear from you.
Hey, so I'm Tara. I'm a writer and multidisciplinary artist, etc. Oh, I just dropped something. Whatever, it's okay. We'll pick that up later. So yeah, I'm a writer, and I used to do other art, but then writing's distracting, and then you do one thing for a little bit, and that just ends up being the thing that you do. I'm also a citizen of the Millbrook Mi'kmaq First Nation, but we don't have to be weird about it. And I'm a Malgoth from Toronto. That's just as culturally important to me. I'm also a socialist, and I think I was kind of born to be. Today's actually my birthday. Thank you. We don't have to be weird about that either. Don't worry about it. But it's everyone's birthday. It's the people's birthday. It's the birthday of all the working people. So I've been a socialist probably since I think I've been old enough to know what that was, and a lot of that is just me emulating my parents who are also socialists and free thinkers. I was raised to believe a lot of question everything, but also don't be so open-minded that your brain falls out, which is an important distinction to make. And I think that as I think most people, who consider themselves free thinkers, but also like to grapple with a lot of big questions and big ideas, I've made a lot of errors, in the prospect of the process of figuring out what I believe about things, because that's a part of it, and I think a lot of what I find so threatening about cancel culture or freaks me out is the threat to, especially when it comes to really young people and young thinkers, and what it means for young people who feel like they don't get to make any mistakes and don't get to grapple with big ideas and experiment with things and try to figure out what they think, because there's this threat of this idea that if you do something, quote unquote wrong, if you just are encountering an idea for the first time and are getting to know all the different contours of it and stuff, there could be these massive and very material consequences to the process of acquiring information about the world, because we can't operate in the world without learning the things that we need to proceed, So I've been very excited getting to know Clementine and Jay, who are two of my best friends, because they're such smart, compassionate, cool people, who I think are also just very dedicated to not only their own intellectual understanding of stuff, but also really encouraging other people to think for themselves, and think about new ideas and make mistakes and and make things that are not mistakes, or just the normal process of acquiring a new idea. I've also been a community organizer, with an intensity that comes and goes, as these things tend to. Since I was about 17, I worked in anti-poverty stuff, student organizing, including a big student strike, and labor stuff at various jobs. One of the best things about getting a new job is figuring out how you can make life really difficult for the people who are paying you. So that's always really fun. And especially in like complicated industries, like, silviculture was a really fun one, because have you ever tried to organize a bunch of tree planters? It's really a fun process. Twig. Yeah, Twig's great. Everyone look up Twig, Google Twig. Cute acronym, isn't it? Tree Workers Industrial Group, or Twig. The cute acronym is really important. It's something to keep in mind. So I am going to just sort of talk and ramble, because that's just sort of what I do. And I'm going to do that by telling a story. I think this is live streamed, so I'm going to apologize in advance to my father-in-law, Craig, because I'm going to talk about him. But because I'm married, which I know, cancelable offense all on its own. And my father-in-law has been a socialist since, I don't know, the 60s or something, also with an intensity that comes and goes and stuff. And I heard secondhand through my brother-in-law this like story about him volunteering for his local socialist organization, his local socialist party. And it was a process of, being told he had to bring his own lunch and work like a long, grueling day. He's like a senior citizen, is like every joint's fucked up in his body, because that's what happens as you get older. And long, grueling day, bringing his, carting his own lunch with a bunch of cranky, judgmental people. And I was like, sounds familiar. And he told this story about coming back from this like long, grueling day of organizing, and calling people and doing, hitting the ground, doing the work. And he walked past where the Conservative Party was doing stuff with their volunteers, and they were having a party, and their party had champagne and smoked salmon. And he was like, I'm not going to volunteer with my local socialist organization anymore. And I could not help but see a parallel to a lot of the stuff that, because a lot of the organizing that I've been doing has been as I've been, like most people, a normal working person who doesn't have a whole bunch of resources and family money to fall back on. So I had to be like working and going to school and all this other stuff. And the often the only benefit to doing it seemed like, knowing that I was doing the right thing, which of course is really good, and then like a lot of hummus and baby carrots. And I like hummus and baby carrots as much as the next socialist, but after a while you start to wonder if there could maybe just be a better way, like a more fun way. Maybe if we could just put a little pizzazz on it, like a little stank on it, it might be a little bit more attractive to people. And this is like this. So anyway, the threat of cancel culture has added this whole extra dimension to like what makes things scary for people when it comes to really trying to like mobilize and organize as many people as possible to be able to like get our poop in a pile as the working people of North America, to try to like actually make material change happen in the world, because it's one thing that we seem to be really good at is weeding out problems, and maybe creating more problems than it seems like there really needs to be, when there's a lot of very real structural problems that we could be like focusing our attention on instead. And it's funny because like I keep on thinking about that quote. I honestly can't remember who said it, but that the right looks for converts while the left looks for traitors. Yeah, right? It's so real. And it's funny because like ever since I've been in Vancouver for I don't know. I have no idea. I'm really jet lagged, so it could have been days. It could be hours. I have no idea how long I've been here. But and I'm a very friendly person. So friendly that I think often people think that I'm making fun of them when I talk to them. But I'm sincere. I promise. This is not an ironic mullet. This is a sincere. This is an earnest mullet. I'm a very earnest person, and a lot of the people that I've been talking to, and they ask like, well, why are you in Vancouver? Or coming from Montreal. And I'm like, first of all, your trees are pink, and that's fucked up and really pretty. So that's a reason to come here all on its own. Second of all, I'm here to do this symposium on divesting from cancel culture, because me and my friends believe that it's very important to try to come up with real concrete steps to make the left suck a little frickin' less. And every single human being that I've spoken to about this has said, and just people I've met randomly have said that they're one, totally sympathetic / deeply interested in every single thing that I've mentioned, and are two, horrified and terrified by the prospect of becoming actually involved with any kind of organizing stuff, because they're afraid of what the consequences are going to be if they, do something wrong. And this has been my experience over and over again. The more, all of my relationships seem to be that people are the interest is there, as long as the interest is not there, and people's hearts are in the ballpark of, at least, of the right place, and that's great. We can work with that. That's good enough. But the perceived material threat of potentially saying the wrong thing, and having it get plastered on the internet and ruining your whole life is so serious that they're they could not dream of actually doing it. They end up doing that thing that my father-in-law's doing, of just being like, I'm going to adjust. I'm going to adjust my investment. And it's funny because when I have these conversations, I want to be able to say it's going to be fine. But I can't say that, they're not wrong. They're not wrong that threat's there. So I've been mulling over, I can't help but I think over and over again about the view of my father-in-law has of the champagne, and just being like, wouldn't it be nice? And there's this term, champagne socialist, which is this judgmental, snooty term about the people who sit around in their fancy apartments and are like, of course I support the unions, and then sip on their champagne or whatever. And it's supposed to be this derisive bad thing, but I can't help but feel like, what's so bad? I don't even drink, but what's so bad about champagne, man? Champagne bad. Is there not enough, we live in a filthy rich first world country, is there not enough luxury to go around, Redistribute the champagne. And it doesn't have to be literally champagne, whatever champagne means to you, It might just be a lot of hummus and baby carrots, so the best hummus, so smooth. And but it's I just can't help but feel like there are ways that we can make this kind of thing more attractive to people, whether it's by having the leftists be a bit, first of all, not having the literal threat of being able to actually ruin the lives of regular working people present and available at all times, but also be a bit more joyful, a bit more fun, a bit more funny, a bit more can we not have some smoked salmon or vegan equivalent, those marinated carrots are really good. I can't help but feel like the one thing that I've heard, I think actually on Clementine's Instagram, is that the left has been struggling to find or make use of its teeth for a really long time in North America, which I think is very true. But it's not because we have, the teeth are there, there's more of us than there are of them, There's definitely more regular working people than there are bajillionaires or bosses or landlords or whatever. So it's the actual power is present and there. So we have the teeth, we just don't really know how to like, our jaws are like, I feel like I have a dog who can't quite figure out how to bury a stick, and he's got all the bits and pieces. He keeps on like putting the stick next to the hole and then being like, what's wrong here? I don't really understand what's, Clementine laughing, she knows my dog really well. But so we have our teeth, but we don't really know how to use it. But it's not really even just that we don't know how to use our teeth. It's that we've lost our teeth or whatever. It's that we also, I think, we don't know how to like locate or mobilize our joy, or mobilize or open up our hearts, to be very, very yoga about it, or to, and the things that we've lost are feel so, I can't focus on it too much because it starts to feel so sad, like our capacity to engage with art in an open-hearted way, our capacity to engage, like witness the world around us in a way that's not just criticism all the time, and I think probably one of the saddest things is a very, someone who is probably primarily like a silly little guy who does other stuff when I have time in between being a silly little guy, is that we've also like, there's this extreme sense that we have lost or don't really know how to use our sense of humor, and we in taking things so seriously, we can lose track of what's important, which is like everything and everyone, everything is and everyone is so important and so much less serious than it needs to be, so much less serious than it seems, I think, when the left's operating in the way it has been, in this like very identitarian and super critical and super anti-solidarity kind of way. So this is something that I want us all to think about, is like how can we focus on working towards achieving real, measurable, material goals in the world that require us to do really very serious work, and then also how can we make it joyful and fun and attractive and open-hearted and funny and silly, because like that simply just is the quality of the universe around us, I think. So that's kind of that's my perspective, and I'm going to introduce our next speaker, who is one of my best friends in the whole world, Clementine Morrigan. Absolutely wonderful person. Thank you, Clementine. Thank you for having me here, and thank you for everything. I love you. Okay, that's all. Thank you. Never mind. It's actually Jay. I take it back. All those things that I said about Clementine are also true about Jay. Love you, Jay. Bye.
Hi, I'm Clementine Morrigan. One half of the fucking canceled podcast. Just kidding. My name's Jay. I'm going to time myself like a good member of AA. Which I am. I'm also going to basically do an AA share. And for those of you who are in the know, who are friends of Bill, as we say, I'm going to talk about what it was like, what happened, what it's like now, because it's a good and easy format. But first I want to say thank you to everybody who helped us put this on. Davina organized it, and it's fucking amazing because we didn't have to. And to everybody who's spoken, it's been really awesome, and I'm really happy to be here. Also, yeah, Clementine and I just arrived yesterday from our tour across the States. We did like 12 stops in different cities, and it was wild time, but it was really fun, and I'm really, really happy that we could do that and that we could end it here. It's nice to be back in Canada, honestly. Yeah, so what was it like? I was a teenage anarchist, I think like many people. Yeah, I was reading like Chomsky and listening to Choking Victim, and that was my political awakening. It was very clear to me from a young age that there were many, many things about the world that were like deeply inequitable and insane and made no sense, you know, and were clearly only in place because like very powerful people benefited in obvious ways from it. And you know, you don't have to be like super astute to notice that, but I noticed it, and I was like, well, how do we change this, you know? And I got politicized in a sort of like anarchist direction, influenced by like punk stuff a lot too, you know? But I remember being a teenager and like going on these anarchist web forums. This was kind of back in the day before social media. And we would be on these old school like chat forums, you know? And I was there with these other anarchists, and we were trying to figure out, I remember this really clearly, like we were trying to figure out how a future stateless society with no market would actually function. And so I remember like literally like sitting down as like a 15-year-old and trying to be like, okay, like how would like sewers work in like an anarchist society, you know? And just sort of being like, okay, so the syndicate of the sewer workers would have to, you know what I mean? And like I would like map it out, you know, and then I would go on my anarchist forum with my anarchist friends and I'd be like, what do you guys think of this like sewer syndicate idea, you know? And that's how we were thinking about anarchism when I was 15 on the internet, because I didn't know any other anarchists. And then I moved to Montreal. When I was 17, I moved out, I moved to Montreal. And I discovered, you know, my new anarchist milieu in Montreal. And I was, you know, hanging out with punks, and I was going to CEGEP and being a punk anarchist in Montreal, which is also when I started having the freedom, I guess, to get drunk every day, which I did. And yeah, I ended up in this kind of weird position where I realized that the other anarchists that I was meeting were not really interested in figuring out how sewers would work in a future stateless society. They were interested in looking very anarchist and making sure that everybody knew that they were anarchists, and making sure that it was you know, very obvious that they were more anarchist than you. And I was sort of like, well, I guess this is how you be an anarchist in Montreal, you know? Like we drink a lot, and we find things to criticize about each other and everybody else and everything. And anytime anybody suggests anything, we kind of like sneer at them. And you know, I was still kind of interested in trying to figure out how sewers would work, but people like weren't really interested in that, it seemed to me. And I also discovered that the vibe in Montreal at that time on the radical left was extremely identitarian, and that was just mounting, you know? And so basically, like what I was discovering was that the way that you thought about absolutely everything was through the lens of identity. And you know, identity is obviously an important thing that structures the lives of everybody, and really like textures the way that our lives work out and the kind of access to power that we have and everything like that. That's real, that's true. It's obvious why people care about this and why we have been talking about it for, you know, literally like hundreds of years. But there are other things that are at work in the world. Identity is not the only lens through which to look at anything, and we do need sewers. And so I was always kind of uncomfortable with this, and I was also like doubly uncomfortable with it because it often didn't really make any fucking sense, you know? And like one thing about me is that I have a really hard time shutting the fuck up. And so, you know, people would say things like, they would just kind of like repeat these dogmatic like orthodoxies at me. Things like, you know, you have to listen to the voices of like BIPOC or something, and I'd be like, which fucking ones, man? That's like such a gigantic category of people, you know? And I'm like, you know, like, have you met any like people? Like, they're often wrong about things, like very frequently, you know, regardless of their identities. And like, you know, many people are very stupid, foolish, do really like dumb things, you know, don't know what the fuck they're talking about, like, you know, and often people who have lived, you know, lives of great deprivation, like don't have like a super good education, might not know how to like rescue the biosphere from like global warming just because they're from like the reserve, you know, like that doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. And that doesn't mean, obviously, that we shouldn't like listen to people who know what the fuck they're talking about, and what the fuck they're talking about might be influenced by their identity, and that could be very generative, right? Anyways, I'm kind of on a tangent now, but people would say things like that to me, and I'd be like, I have a question. And people didn't like that, you know? So I always had like a bit of a reputation in Montreal as like an annoying guy who would like ask annoying questions about things. And so, you know, I would get heat for that. But at the same time, I would also have conversations with people, and almost universally, almost everyone that I talked to about this stuff would be like, yeah, it doesn't really make sense, but it kind of makes sense if you think about it, you know, like whatever. Or they would be like, yeah, like that guy really goes way too far, but it's, you know, and there was a lot of that, you know. And another thing that was happening was that I was noticing that more and more our preferred method of dealing with conflict was like scorched earth, like nuclear war, social destruction, you know? And like it would just be like, this person is now like cut off from the human community, like forever, you know? And this is how we would deal with shit. And it would be like, it's not just that person's like wrong or like dumb or like did something we don't like. It's like that person is like a fascist, you know? That person is an abuser. Like that person is like not just an abuser, but like a really evil, special kind of abuser or whatever, you know, that can't ever be like near normal, good people ever again, right? And I also had a problem with that, and I also asked questions about that, which people also didn't like. And that in particular, when I talked to almost everyone about it, they were like, yeah, it's really fucked up. It's really fucked up, and I don't know what to do about it, and I really wish that we weren't acting like this, but what are you going to do, you know? Because it's really fucked up, and we don't want it to happen to us, you know, obviously. And it just kind of like kept mounting. Like both of those things kept mounting, you know. I think originally, like it was kind of like it was on its way up, but there was still pushback against it and so on. But it became really hegemonic on the radical left, like this kind of method of engaging with other people, and this method of talking about power. It was like all identity, and it was all cancellation, and like that's what I just kept seeing over and over, more and more. At the same time, I was drinking really, really heavily. I'm an alcoholic. That's why I go to AA. And eventually I got sober. And I started learning things about myself when I got sober. I started learning things about the world, too. And I started coming to like a whole bunch of spiritual realizations, you know. One of which was that like I am not I'm not just like a sort of like list of every like bad thing I've ever done, which is what was being heavily I was being heavily indoctrinated into. Because even though I had like criticism of this kind of culture, I was still like very much in it, like very much of it, you know. And like I was criticizing it, but like kind of quietly and from within, you know. Because I really thought that was like, I was very invested in being on the left, and I really wanted to be a good leftist, and I thought that that's how you did it, and I didn't know what else to do, you know, so that's where I was. And I was like, I remember this moment with my old sponsor, my AA sponsor. Like, I was supposed to be doing step work, which is, you know, if you're in the program, you know what I'm talking about, but basically you're trying to figure out how to get your shit together. And I remember I had this like sketchbook, and I made this like crazy diagram of like every single identity point that I have, and sort of like how they map onto privilege and oppression. But it wasn't just like white. It was like, you know, like an Anglophone living in Quebec, but my family was French, but they got assimilated. And I have like an indigenous ancestor. You know, and like just like everything, you know, everything, and I created this like fucking crazy chart, like it was wild, you know, and I showed it to my fucking sponsor, and I was like, I did this, and he was like, go to a fucking meeting, like what are you doing, like make coffee for people, like what? Like, put out some chairs, like, stop with this shit, you know? And I was like, this guy doesn't understand, you know? It's from a different generation, you know? Whatever. But he was completely right. Like, it was like the most useless possible thing that I could be doing. It, like, helped no one in any material way. But anyways, so that's the culture that I was stuck in, you know? Yeah. But, yeah, so then what happened? Clementine got canceled. in a really brutal and insane way. It really like nuked her life, and she was my partner at the time, and she still is. Yeah, it was really, really fucked up. And we ended up creating the podcast fucking canceled because it was like COVID lockdown in Montreal, and it was like extremely fucked up, and like we were going on our like government mandated walk, like, you know, and like, you know, just like ranting about what was going on because it was like so fucking crazy. Like it was absolutely like mind-bogglingly insane what was happening to Clementine. And so we were coming up with good content, man. We were walking, we were just talking about it, and we were like really coming to some conclusions. Like, I don't know, I have an academic background for my sins in anthropology, and Clementine has a background in being really fucking smart about a lot of different things, and also an academic background. And I don't know, we were really like analyzing this phenomenon and trying to figure it out. And we were coming up with some good shit. And I was like, we should make a fucking podcast about this. Like, what the fuck do we have to lose, you know? Like, they're trying to tank your fucking career anyway over, like, insane, made-up nonsense. So, like, I don't know, like, what else are they going to say? It turns out they could say a lot. Yeah, we had no idea. But, yeah, so that was what was happening. And then, like, you know, honestly, like, a couple months after that, after we dropped the podcast, they, like, came for me. And, you know, people made like this like website about me. It was like real psychotic. It was like super, super long. It was like the length of like a small novel. Like it was translated into both official languages. They like clearly like paid someone to ghostwrite it because I know that the people who made it like don't write that well. And it was really wild, man. And they took like, you know, basically imagine like the 6 people who hate you the most. Are you imagining them? There's like 3 exes, some old roommates, like a friend you had a falling out with. Okay, think about them. Now imagine they're all in a room together, okay? And then they've paid someone to sit at a table with them, and then they all say all the things that they hate most about you, and then like a writer like writes it down and like makes it sound as bad as possible while also adding on every single identity point that they possibly can to make it just like that much more spicy. So that's what they did. It was wild. And then because Clementine's famous, Instagram famous in queer world, it was seen by like hundreds of thousands of people. And it was fucking crazy for me. It was really bad. It was the worst thing that's ever happened to me. Some bad things have happened in my life, and it was by far the worst. I was very suicidal, wanted to die, was considering options for making that happen. I lost many of my friends. I lost many opportunities and like hope for the future because it was like completely and absolutely and utterly fucking insane. And you know, I wanted to be a teacher. Like that was what I wanted to do, not a fucking podcaster. But I was like, I can't be a fucking teacher, man. These fucking psychos will find me, you know? They'll find where I work, and they will like email the school and be like, this person is like a dangerous like Nazi cult leader, predator, like whatever, you know? And so like I just gave up on that. I gave up on a lot of things, you know? It was like really, really fucked up. It's true that it's a traumatic experience. Like I'm not exaggerating about that at all, especially when it happens on like a huge scale like that. I still have like really intense like PTSD about it. Like I'll have dreams about it where I wake up in like a cold sweat with my heart pounding, you know? Like once there was like this fucking billboard in Montreal that had like my first name on it, like, because I think it was like a radio guy whose name was like Jay something, and I would see a billboard and be like, I immediately would have, like, my brain would be like, that's about me, you know, and I would just be like shaking and shit, like on the metro, which is crazy. I mean, that's a PTSD response. That's like not like a normal way that I react to fucking billboards, you know. Yeah, it was really awful, but something came out of it for me, you know, which is that I was really like, I'm just gonna say it, freed from my shackles, because I was like, okay, now I really have nothing to lose, man. And like now I'm just like, okay, like the path is sort of like in front of me, because like I said, I have a really hard time shutting the fuck up. So I was just like, I'm just going to like, okay, I can't uncancel myself. It's impossible. Like I've seen it fucking happen to people. You can't do it. I can't like be accountable because to who? It's like there's like 100,000 people who think I'm like a fucking Nazi or something, you know? It's like impossible to just like be accountable to 100,000 people or to the internet at large sort of like hallucinating to itself about you. Like what the fuck do you do about that, you know? Also, I fundamentally don't agree with the idea that like a bunch of strangers can like hold someone accountable. It's like a fucking absurd idea. And so I was like, the only thing I can do about this is just like change the culture itself. And so I was like, that's what I'm gonna fucking do, because you backed me into a corner, you know? So that's what I'm doing. And you know, it also gave me an opportunity to clarify a lot of my politics, because I was no longer afraid of like of like stepping out of line, because I was already fucking thrown way past the line, you know? And I was like, okay, all right. So when I think about it, and when I think about my spiritual values and my like ethical integrity, I don't give a fuck if you're good. I don't care if you're good. Couldn't give a fuck. Don't care if you're a good person. I think that like people are super messy. I know that, in fact. I've seen it. I've seen many, many people change also. Always in AA, never in an accountability process. Weird. But I've seen people who are like literal murderers become like really nice people. One of my favorite people is a murderer, actually. Two of my favorite people are murderers. Come to think of it. I work at a homeless shelter. That's my job. And, you know, we do like harm reduction, and we like help people out who are having a real fucking crazy time. And, you know, everybody who's chronically homeless has like severe childhood abuse in their past, and like severe trauma. And they act real fucked up. Shocker. And so like, it means that a lot of the clients that I have done really wild shit, you know? One of them's a murderer, and he's a cool guy. But the point there is just that, like, I'm completely uninterested in playing this sort of, like, purity politics game of trying to, like, tally up people's sins, you know, and sort of, like, use them against them and use that to understand who they are as people. It strikes me as extremely naive. And not in touch with the real world, not in touch with like the working class, not in touch with the realities of people's lives. It's a very like puritanical way of looking at the world that reminds me much more of a religion than it does of politics. And if it is a politics, it reminds me much more of conservatism than it does of the anarchism that I was invested in when I was a teenager. And I want to help rebuild a left in this continent that is rooted in the working class of this continent, which is a multiracial working class, which is, you know, includes queer people and trans people and people of all sorts of different identities. I'm just going to pause this because I'm about to go over my time, but I don't care. That is rooted in that North American working class, which means necessarily that it includes millions of people who've done deeply stupid and objectionable things. And if we decide that we're going to welcome them with open arms up until the point where we find out inevitably that they've done something stupid and objectionable, that strikes me as a deeply unhelpful strategy. It also strikes me as delusional. And it means that we exclude absolutely everyone in the name of inclusion, because there is no one who hasn't done something that could get them fucking nuked from orbit by you know, people with the side of their heads shaved. And they will do it. They will do it. They will find something and they will nuke you from orbit because they believe that that is what politics is. They believe that that is what it means to be a leftist. They believe that what it means to be a leftist is to find people who have done things that are wrong and destroy their lives. But that's not what it means to be a leftist. What it means to be a leftist is to build, rebuild, help organize, whatever, a left. Because one of the things that I realize is that we don't really have a left in North America right now. We have lots of leftists. And we don't really have a left, because what a left is an organized movement that is capable of either influencing power in a specific kind of coordinated way or taking power, right? Now, when we look at the left that currently exists in North America, like, I remember Clementine and I tried to join a socialist organization in Montreal because we were sick of anarchists. And so we joined this like socialist organization, and like honestly, within like 3 or 4 weeks, we were like, Jesus fucking Christ, and we like left because they were so fucking annoying, man. But like I remember like trying to talk to this guy, like the like lead guy of this socialist organization, and be like, okay, like just help me out here, man. There's like 13 different socialist organizations in Montreal alone, and that's not even including like the political parties, like. And I was like, why, why should I join yours, And he gave me like a detailed rundown on why like every single one of the other ones were like reactionaries, they were like ultra leftists, they were social chauvinists, they had the wrong stance on the Cuba question, like whatever the fuck. And I was like, Jesus fucking Christ, man. I was like, how many fucking socialist groups do we need? Like how many, like, you know what I mean? Like, do we really need to be arguing about the fucking Cuba question right now? Is that like the most important thing for us to be doing right now? It strikes me that maybe it's not. Like maybe people need, like maybe we need to be figuring out how to make it so that landlords can't just infinitely raise the rent. I don't know. Like I can think of many things that we could be doing, I mean, I guess, like maybe like we need to like get those fucking people houses too, I know it's more complicated than that, but like, yes. Yeah, and, oh man, heckling, that wasn't really heckling, but it does throw me off. Please don't do that. Socialism is good. Solidarity, also good. Oh yeah, socialists, annoying. I'm gonna get off stage soon, but yeah, all I wanted to say was that like we really desperately need to be finding a way to get like all the different like left like tiny little splinter groups to figure out ways to work together, because it's like fucking ridiculous that we can't. And the ones that do exist constantly are either like attacking themselves over like Marxist esoterica, or because honestly most of the left like does not read Marx anymore. They're just canceling each other over like absolute insanity constantly over and over and over and over again, and destroying any capacity that we possibly have to build a left worthy of the name. And we are currently being outflanked by conservatives on like many issues, which is insane, when like far right assholes are the only ones in the political spectrum willing to talk about class. It's like a fucking weird problem, man. Like really weird, yeah. Anyways, you guys are applauding, so I'll just leave it with that.
Thank you. Sorry, I'm short and I can't understand how to adjust microphones. Hello, I'm Clementine. Thanks for being here, guys. Wow. Thank you so much to Davina for organizing this. Thanks to all the other speakers who came up. Thank you all for being here. My heart is really full. I'm also extremely tired. And we have been on the road like since April 2nd, so it's been a minute. We've been driving all across the United States of America, doing all of these events. This is the 12th and final event of the tour, so it's been really fucking cool. It's been, I'm also timing myself, so I'm just making sure I did that start. It's been really fucking cool. We have met so many fucking people over the course of this tour who are brave enough to come into a space where we're having these conversations, and that really fucking warms my heart, because it's like when we started doing this work, like, I couldn't even imagine coming into a space like this, I was way too fucking scared. And I know that it takes courage to show up to an event like this, so I want to thank all you in the audience tonight for coming out. It really means a lot to us. And we have met hundreds of people with that courage during this tour, and we have talked to, not all the people who come to our event are canceled. Many of them are. We've talked to tons and tons of canceled people. We're joking about how, like, to associate with a canceled person is to take on the stigmatization of that person, And I'm like, I feel like I've maxed out my level of cancellation on like some kind of super max level, because it's like, not only do I constantly associate with canceled people, but now on the tour, all the fans are like getting like pictures with us. And it's just like all these canceled people, I don't even know what they're canceled for. Like, I don't know anything about it, but we're just like smiling and like, they're very nice. And I know there's people who are fucking mad about it. And like people are coming up to us, after the events. It's not uncommon for people to start crying or to tell us that our work saved their lives, like literally. And I believe it when people say that, because when I was canceled, like I used to be suicidal when I was a teenager. I've had a really fucked up life, and I was very suicidal when I was a teenager, but I got sober and I got lots of therapy, and I had not been actively suicidal in a long time. And like when it happened to me, I was like very fucking close to really seeing that as my only way out. So I understand how much this drives people away from the belief that they have a future. And that's really fucking wrong. And so the fact that we can do this work and help to show people that they do have a future and that they do belong to the human community and that their lives are not garbage, no matter what anybody says, is really fucking important to me. And it's honestly the main reason why I do this work, but I do it for a lot of reasons. But the main reason is because no one is disposable, literally means no one is disposable. And human life is sacred, and no person should be driven to the brink of suicide because they feel like their life has no purpose anymore because they're so dehumanized by the culture. So I fucking know that this is important work and it's something that I really believe in, but it's also really scary. And I mean, our confidence in doing this work has obviously increased. You know, we've been doing it for a long time. What Jay said about how it's like, we were kind of like, what more could they say? And then we're like, oh shit, yeah, they can definitely say more. It's gotten fucking crazy. And like 2 events ago in Portland, we did an event in Portland. The event went really well. We like were talking to everybody and like vibing. It was actually the most well-attended event of the tour. And then we went back to my car and my tires were slashed and shit had been poured all over my car. And like at the same time, you know, I have people fucking telling me that cancel culture doesn't exist, you know? They fucking slashed my tires, man, and poured shit all over my car. So cancel culture definitely exists. And it's really fucked up, man. It's a really fucked up thing to do. And like to think that, you know, what we are advocating for and what we're doing is we're traveling around talking about socialism, solidarity, compassion, the idea that human beings are not disposable. And this is the politics that is pissing people off so much that they need to slash my fucking tires, you know? Also, these same people like to call me an abuse apologist. And I'm like, look in the fucking mirror, honestly. So, yeah, I kind of just wanted to talk about that. I haven't posted about it online yet because I just didn't want to steal the thunder of the rest of the tour and I wanted to be able to just like do the final events. But yeah, they slashed my fucking tires. So, I'm also going to talk a little bit about what it was like, what happened, and what it's like now. My life really sucked in a lot of ways, to be perfectly honest. I, unfortunately, am a survivor of childhood sexual abuse, and like many people who have had those experiences, I had a set of other experiences that tend to flow from it that included alcoholism, moving out really young, getting locked up in psych wards, you know, hanging out with sketchy people, doing sketchy shit, and a cycle of violence in which I was constantly being exposed to more and more traumatic events, including domestic violence and a lot of crazy shit. That was my life up until the age of 25. When I was 25, I got sober and I got into AA and I got into therapy and I started to change my life. As well as all that sketchy shit that I just mentioned and all the repetitive traumas that I've been through, another aspect of my life and my story is that I'm a queer person. And I was like a little baby queer who like knew I was queer when I was 10 years old and came out of the closet in 2002 in a small town. And so, you know, when I got sober, I mean, I'm a leftist, I was always a feminist, and I was always queer. So I landed in social justice culture when I got sober. And what I noticed in social justice culture was that it was fucking really cruel. It was really unforgiving. It was constantly scrutinizing people to look for what was wrong with them and then punishing them for it. And the kinds of things that people were being scrutinized for and punished for were often relatively small, you know? People were getting called out. Back in the day, they called it call-out culture. And people were getting called out for like minor things that they had like said online or for disagreements or just, you know, for really fucking absurd shit. And when I was faced with this, I was like, what the fuck, man? Like, how am I ever going to make it in this world? Because the skeletons in my closet are not like I tweeted something one time that was a little bit problematic, you know? The skeletons in my closet are that I was a street-involved alcoholic who was like a fucking tornado running through people's lives, you know? I was a fucking disaster. And like, violence was my life. Violence was all around me all the time. So like, of course, I also was a really fucking violent person when I was in that world. So if that, I certainly wasn't politically correct. Let's just put it that way. And so if those are the skeletons in my closet, how am I ever going to, fucking make it in this world? Is there even a point? And the only reason that I believe maybe there is a point is because social justice culture wasn't the only influence in my life. The other influence in my life was 12 steps and also therapy, but especially 12 steps. When I was in 12 steps, I was treated with unconditional compassion and positive regard. People kept saying to me, keep coming back. They didn't say to me, hey, you did some fucked up shit, fuck you, get out of here, They said, we will love you until you love yourself. And they gave me cookies and coffee. And they were nice, And that kindness was staggering. It was staggering, and even though I couldn't believe that I was deserving of it, I believed that they believed that, and it was enough to change my life, I would not be the person that I am today, and I would not be standing here before you if it wasn't for the many, many alcoholics who extended grace and compassion to me and did not define me through the worst things that I had ever done, who instead saw in me my humanity and what I was capable of and what I was moving towards. And so because of those people, I continued. But I was caught in this extremely confusing double bind where on the one hand, I was getting healthier and healthier, and I was recovering from alcoholism and from complex PTSD, and I was rebuilding my life, and I was building my integrity, and I was becoming the person that I am now, And on the other hand, I was in this culture that in so many ways mirrored the dynamics of my abusive family growing up. The culture that I was in told me, that I had to earn my place, that I had to be good, and that if I was told I was bad, then I had to apologize and grovel and, cross my own boundaries and do whatever I was told because I'm being told that I'm bad, right? This fucking framework is the same exact framework that I grew up with in an abusive childhood home. And at a certain point in my sobriety, I had this light bulb moment, which came to me in the words, being good will never solve the problem because the problem is not that I am bad. Sarah, I really resonated with what you were saying about childhood trauma and the patterns of childhood trauma, because there are so many people who have this deep fucking belief that they are not deserving, that they are not good enough, and that they are secretly really bad. And unfortunately, this culture that claims to be about justice is just fucking reinforcing this idea. And I can't fucking get behind that, I can't get behind that because I really do know that people who do fucked up things or have done fucked up things do so for reasons, They do so due to the conditions of their lives. And those reasons are not all the same, but there are reasons why people do things. And I don't believe that it's because they are inherently bad. And what I would like to do is actually resource people and help people and give people what they need, and also show people that that transformation is not only possible for them, but that it's gonna feel really fucking good, Because that is what I learned in recovery. But basically, so I was in this situation where on the one hand, I'm recovering, on the other hand, I'm caught up in these social dynamics. And not only was I I was enacting all the things that Sarah talked about. I was hypervigilant. I was constantly studying the ever-changing rules of social justice culture. I knew, exactly as the language shifted, what was the appropriate thing to say, what you were not allowed to say. I tell this story all the time, but it's just a perfect example of it. I literally walked into a room and said, hey guys, and then I had a panic attack. I literally had a panic attack. And it's absurd, but I literally was oh my fucking God, I said guys, that's gendered language. I wasn't supposed to say that. And I literally ruminated about it for the rest of the night, obsessively. And then I apologized to the person who I had said it to, very weirdly. Hi, I'm really sorry that I said guys. And the person was okay, what, But that is the kind of anxious preoccupation I had with trying to be fucking good, And the other thing that I was doing beyond this hypervigilant scanning and obsessing over my language was that I would not fucking be friends with people who were canceled. If somebody was canceled, I'm sorry, but I could not associate with them because I was way too fucking scared that that contagion would come onto me and that I would also be canceled. And I was like, I have too much fucking skeletons in my closet as it is. I'm struggling as it is to not be canceled. I'm not going down for someone else, you know? And I'm sure like there's many people in the room who can relate to that. And when I first met Jay, like we hit it off really, really well. And we added each other on Facebook, and I thought that they were really cool. And then I received a message that was like, hey, just to let you know, I saw you friended this person. First of all, weird. Why is this person watching who I'm friending on fucking Facebook? Very weird. But, you know, I saw that you like friended this person, and I just want to let you know, like people have pointed out this person is very problematic. And so I unfriended Jay, and I wouldn't be their friend for like 2 fucking years, you know? And this was someone who turns out I have a lot in common with, who actually turned out to be a really important person in my life, but for 2 years I wouldn't be their friend because of this. And basically, I reached a point where the cognitive dissonance between my recovery and my integrity and my values and the ways I was behaving inside this culture, like I could not square it anymore. And so I started to make changes. In the 12 steps, I learned about integrity and about taking actions that are in alignment with my integrity. And I realized that cutting someone out just because someone told me that some vague rumors about them was not in alignment with my integrity. So I started to apologize to people that I had treated that way and reach out to them and make amends. And one of those people was Jay. And Jay accepted that with a lot of grace, and we started to hang out. Then we started dating, and now they are my long-term partner and problematic podcast co-host. So it's weird how that works. But even as I started to divest, and like, you know, Jay was someone that was also thinking about these things, so our relationship became a safe container to talk about it and to actually admit that I was like, I don't like this shit. I don't feel like this is justice. I don't want to treat people like this. I don't want to be so stressed and so scared and like in my head like this. But, you know, I am a writer. Being a writer was always my dream. I have a public-facing job. And I was just like, I don't fucking want to be canceled. So I was still too afraid to like really publicly come out and say it. I started writing about it a little bit, but in my zines, but online I was like way too fucking afraid to talk about it. But then in 2020, I was canceled in the most absurd and ridiculous way possible, which is that I was like literally accused of not posting about something. That was the fucking cancellation. And I had posted about it, you guys. I had posted about it. But not that that fucking matters. Again, why are you monitoring about what I'm posting about or not posting about? Fucking weird. Why are you in my DMs about that? But yes, I was accused of not posting about something. And as a result of that, I lost almost every single relationship in my life. My friends abandoned me like in a massive tidal wave of loss. I had to move because my roommates wanted me to do an accountability process. And I just received like a fucking onslaught of like dehumanizing harassment for a very long time. And I knew that like, you know, what my friends were all being harassed, you know, like they didn't just decide not to be my friend. They were all being harassed and told that they needed to hold me accountable. And that if they didn't hold me accountable, then they were just as bad, you know? So my friends were trying to hold me accountable, and they were like, Clementine, just make a statement, you know? Say you're sorry. Say that you know that it was wrong. And I was like, well, first of all, what the fuck, man? I did post about it. But secondly, what the fuck is going on? What is going on? What are you talking about? And third, what am I arguing here? Like, what is actually the case that you want me to make? Because I knew that, like, to basically say that I'm not deserving of harassment, to make the case that I'm not deserving of this dehumanization and harassment, would be to make the argument that I have never done anything wrong. Because in the logic of cancel culture, it is only like moral purity that can protect you from this, but it doesn't actually protect you anyway. But like that's the mythology, right? How can I, with the past that I have, claim moral purity. I can't, you know? And so I realized that like I was in this position because yes, I was canceled for absurd nonsense, and I could have like sort of clung to that to be like, well, I was canceled for absurd nonsense and I didn't deserve it. But like, what if I had been canceled for some real shit that had actually happened in my life, you know? That could equally have happened. Maybe I just don't deserve it either way. Maybe human beings should not be dehumanized and exiled from their communities relentlessly and denied empathy and compassion, you know? And so that's basically like the heart of my politics and what I believe. And apparently it's extremely controversial and it gets me into a lot of trouble, including people slashing my fucking tires. I'm just gonna turn this off because I'm about to come to the end of my time and it's gonna like beep. Oh my God. The last thing that I wanna say, or that I wanna talk about, is that very, very often, people call me an abuse apologist, and they say that I don't care about survivors. And I know that the people who slashed my tires think that they are doing that violent act in service of survivors. The fact that I am a survivor, that I am literally a survivor of like an extensive amount of physical violence and stalking, and that somebody slashing my tires is like not only scary in the general sense, but also like deeply triggering for me as someone who has experienced that much violence in my life, doesn't matter to them. Because in their mind, I am not the good kind of survivor. I am not the deserving kind of survivor. I'm the bad kind. And my position is that there are no good and bad survivors. There are traumatized people. And traumatized people deserve compassion and resources and care. Sometimes you need to intervene if traumatized people are acting in insane and violent ways, for sure. People definitely intervened on me. Sometimes you need boundaries. That's also totally acceptable and okay. But there is nothing that a person can do that exempts them from humanity. There is nothing that a person can do that means that we are now justified in violently assaulting them, dehumanizing them, driving them out of community, stripping them of their belonging to this world. That's what I believe. And my belief in that is deeply rooted in my understanding of trauma and my understanding that other survivors of child abuse, which is one of the worst fucking things that can happen to someone, survivors of child abuse are far more likely to be fucking insane and to do insane shit and to end up doing things that traumatize other people. That's how the cycle of violence works. And so if we care about survivors, we have to care about all survivors, which includes survivors who end up doing things that are abusive. Very controversial, I know. But while I was, preparing for this tour and doing all the planning for this tour and receiving a whole bunch of harassment online, calling me an abuse apologist, I also had the experience of seeing my ex-partner who abused me in my early 20s, and I was in a really violent relationship with this guy. He was all over the news because he just sexually assaulted a woman like randomly on the subway, and now he's back in jail. And I know that this kind of politics that's being offered through cancel culture is like, fuck him, like, kill your rapist, blah, blah, blah. But what I know about him is that he's also fucking traumatized and that he's also a survivor too. And yes, like there needs to be intervention, but there also needs to be resourcing. And while my life went one way and I got sober and I got therapy and I got help and I got out of that life, his life went another way and he got trauma and jail and trauma and jail, and now look where he is, So if we actually care about survivors, we actually have to do something about the cycle of violence, and we can't do anything about the cycle of violence if our response to it is to isolate and traumatize people. So thank you guys so much for coming out here tonight. Thank you for being brave enough to have this conversation. Now we're gonna do a Q&A. So if the other people wanna come back up onto the stage, we're gonna have an opportunity for you guys to ask us some questions. Thank you.
You can hear me now, okay. If you guys could bring up some chairs, and I'll actually stay here, so if anybody has some comments or questions, they can raise your hand and I can give you the mic. Okay. Thank you.
I would love more water. That's so nice. Thank you so much.
But we could have a little more lights if that's possible. Wow, that worked. Okay.
Hold on, I'm just gonna move this like this. Okay, now we're good. Amazing.
Okay. That was wonderful. I'm so happy to be associated with these people who I've just met. Please feel free to direct a question to any of us, anybody who you've heard speak, or just ask a general comment, make a general comment, and I will give you the mic. Feel free.
I see a hand back there.
Okay. Yes.
Thank you for speaking tonight. I was dragged here by a friend and didn't know what to expect. And it was a lot to take in, but I heard a lot of vulnerable stories, and I want to thank you guys for sharing it. Earlier on, I heard, I forget your name already, the therapist, say, Sarah, be like, advise your clients, take time off from the internet. And I want to extrapolate that logic, like, why be on the internet? Like, I might be like a irredeemable, like anachronistic Luddite, but I mean, there's a lot of noise there, you know? And I think I was talking to Kira, was it? About, like, the Greeks had a term, typhus, for mist, or the noise coming from the agora, social convention. And the prescription against succumbing to typhus. I don't know if it shares, like, you know, an etymological root with typhus, like the bug, but it's like, just ignore it, you know, like, that's like, just get away from the infection. And I've heard a lot of, and so much of our anxieties about being canceled come from social media, come from the internet. And I've heard a lot of the podcasters also talk about their experiences on social media, and I imagine still are on, like the internet. And I mean, you also talked a little bit of Shoshana Zuboff, and I don't know if Zuboff is as radical as being like make a complete break, but they're a little nostalgic of a time before the internet happened, and maybe I am too. And so I wonder what your thoughts on, you know, just severing that noise away and keeping it, and if we can't really comprehend ostracism on this level writ large, like maybe, you know, keep it to a level where relationships are face to face, and that is like the root of the problem.
Yeah, that's a really great question. I'm going to use a really cheesy therapy metaphor, so bear with me. There's always this metaphor of like, you have your tool belt, you have all your different tools. And there's no wrong tool, right? But a hammer can't do what a wrench can do, right? So the internet, social media, they're tools. Sometimes they're tools that work well for us, and sometimes they're tools that are used to harm us. And so I think it's important that we're aware that, you know, yeah, for some people, the answer might be no more social media. For some people, that might be cutting off all forms of human connection. So I kind of take the viewpoint, it's neither good nor bad. I always come back to this question, and this is from acceptance and commitment therapy, is what serves you? So there's no one right answer, there's no one wrong answer, but how is it serving you? And for a lot of people, social media isn't serving them, it's harming them. And so for them, their answer might be, I need to take a step back, I need to take a break, right? But for some people, they might use social media as a platform, you know, to spread a message, to connect to other marginalized people. I mean, there's really scary stuff out there. There's social media that teaches young people how to harm themselves and get away with it. There's also social media platforms that help people who've experienced self-harm and suicidality connect to other people. So for me, it's not about sort of cutting it off altogether, but just recognizing when is it serving and when is it not serving, and then being able to follow through on the actions that align with what's serving and what's not serving us.
I'm also a really big fan of the screen time app. There's a password. I don't know what it is. My husband knows what it is. I am like, I can use it for an hour a day. And I'm like, don't tell me. I don't want to know. Get a trusted person. Get them to hold on to your password. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Rodney. I have complex PTSD, and I am 23 years sober in that secret society. But I get anxious talking about these subjects in public, so I have to kind of take my time to be clear on this. I grew up in Pittsburgh. My understanding of leftism was about working people, and it was about class struggle. And you know, even though my family were fundamentalists and succumbed to the Reaganite era, they still always believed that you supported the union. My family were coal miners and steel workers, and my uncle was killed by working on the railroads. You know, so they understood that work was dangerous and that people struggled on a daily basis. One thing I was saying to my friends here was, if I was to, any of the guys I grew up with, who I still talk with, if they were put in front of a group of cancel culture or social justice people, they'd be canceled. Once they heard them speak, they'd be canceled in 5 fucking minutes, right? But they claim to be leftists. There's no fucking connection between that in my mind. So my question is, like, for example, I'm a poet, and a buddy of mine had read one of my books, and he had to get drunk to call me to talk about it. And he said, you know, you wrote about the places we're from. I didn't think anyone would write about the places we're from. And I said to him, good, I'm glad, that's why I did it. And he said, but it doesn't make me gay. Now, he'd be canceled right fucking there, done, right? But I know where he's coming from with that statement, right? And I'm not gonna stop having a conversation with my friend. So I'm getting to my point, or my question. Is it accidental? I mean, people like Glenn Greenwald say the Democrats consciously chose identity politics as a place to focus on rather than working class politics. And that, you know, sort of began with the Clintons and moved forward. Because they realized they were going to shift their focus to educated suburbanites and move away from working people. So my question is it accidental that cancel culture seems to be, the people who support cancel culture and identity politics are so out of touch with actual working class people, or is it intentional? And if so, who's driving that intention?
That's a super good question. I think it's a combination of both, honestly. I think that so there's this great term called capitalist realism that you may have heard of from Mark Fisher. I think it's really important for understanding a lot of what's been going on. I'm going to try to give a super brief Sparks notes on it. Basically, when the Soviet Union collapsed, the Western left was deprived of a model of like an alternate kind of economy. Whatever you think of the Soviet Union, that's true. Like, it imploded, and then all of a sudden capitalism was the only game in town, and the Western left was like extremely, they didn't know what the fuck to do anymore. And it turned into this kind of scenario where people just assumed that, as Mark Fisher put it, the end of the world was more likely than the end of capitalism, and it was impossible to imagine the end of capitalism. And so the left in the West pivoted away from anything to do with trying to transform the economy towards all these other questions, primarily questions of representation and identity, because those were things that they felt that they could influence, particularly because a lot of these people were working in academia. And it's no wonder, and this is something that David Graeber said, it's no wonder that they all decided that power comes from words instead of guns, because there were people who used words all day. So they were very into Foucault. Yeah, so I think that that's one of the things that happened, that like the left, like legitimately, like without being pushed, kind of abandoned a lot of class politics after the 90s. So that's one thing. The second thing is that I think that as this happened, the major political parties in North America were like awesome, because the major political parties in North America are all run by the ruling class, obviously. And they have no interest in a class politics. I think that the Democrats in the U.S., like, they were pushed in that direction by necessity for like a long time, and by like organized labor. But organized labor imploded in North America, barely exists anymore, and the Democrats didn't need that anymore, and so they abandoned it completely. And a similar thing happened in Canada. I mean, the NDP is like, how did you put it? You were like, you get dental maybe, and like lots of identity politics, and like they'll barely like say the word working class, but the fucking like Pierre Poilievre will. It's fucking crazy. It's this like bizarre situation that's happened. I think that like, I don't know if there was like a nefarious plot. I think that like these people who are all in the ruling class just like noticed that this, like, they didn't have to fucking talk about it anymore, which suits them very well. They don't want an organized working class. That's very bad for business, So yeah, anybody else want to jump in?
Yeah, the American Marxist scholar Adolph Reed talks about how identitarianism is a class politics. It's the politics of the professional managerial class. And I think when I heard that for the first time, a lot of things started clicking, because if we're concerned about having enough diversity on corporate boards or in leadership positions, it's not that class, like everyone just forgot about it. It's that it actually benefits the professional managerial class to have us so concerned about the identities of people in positions of power rather than talking about material needs.
Yeah, like you will often see like big giant like corporations like Amazon like posting little identitarian things, right? To like be backing identitarian movements. You're not going to see them backing unions, right? At the exact same time that Amazon was like posting like Black Lives Matter stuff, they were like firing Chris Smalls for trying to organize, right? So you can see like what is threatening, right? And like working class people with a politics of solidarity is threatening, and like infighting and like, representational politics is not.
We've got a question back here. Sorry, I'm going over there next. Okay. Who had their hand up? You sure? Okay.
Yes. So, okay, I can talk a lot about this, but I'll try to keep it relatively short. So basically, yes, there is a situation with cancel culture in which many cancellations are based on false or overstated accusations, and sometimes they're based on true things, right? So the call is always for accountability, and sometimes accountability isn't even necessary or possible because the person did not do what they're accused of, or what they're accused of is absolutely absurd. But yes, there are situations in which people did do like hurtful things, or in some cases like seriously abusive things. So personally, I can't even with the word accountability anymore because it's just been so fucking ruined by this culture that I don't even like to use it. But the word that I like to use is responsibility. And so to me, responsibility is being able to take responsibility for what you did, understand what led you to do it, what were the conditions in your life that led you there, making the changes necessary that you can actually change your behavior in a sustained and ongoing way, and then making direct amends wherever possible and actions of repair wherever possible. So this is the model that I am 100% stealing from the 12 steps. And how this works, right, is that it doesn't happen on an immediate timeline, like in accountability, like calls for accountability and cancel culture stuff. There's this expectation that accusation happens and then immediately the person has to be accountable. That is not what responsibility is. In the 12 steps, you're literally warned against doing that. When people first come in and they're first getting sober, and like they're like, please do not run out and do a step 9. That's where you make amends. It's step 9. There's 8 steps that go before it, right? If you go and you apologize right away before you understand why it is that you did what you did and change the things necessary so that you can actually change your behavior, you're very likely to go and continue the same behavior, and then that is causing even more hurt because now you just made this amends and then you went and you broke the people's trust again, right? So true responsibility requires a huge amount of internal work, depending on how severe it is, like what your patterns are and what you're doing, but it requires a huge amount of internal work. That work cannot be done in isolation. It's impossible. People need community and resources to do that work. They need other people to talk to understand, to work through what the fuck was going on in my life? Why was I doing these things? Because it's not very clear to them at first, right? And so for most people, I definitely think, you need a therapist, you might need a sponsor, and you need some close, trusted friends who are not being dishonest with you, who are willing to tell you the truth about the impact of your behavior and to give you honest feedback about it, but who still see your humanity and treat you with an unconditional positive regard. With boundaries, doesn't mean they have to put up with your bullshit. They will, like as my sponsor would say, I will not co-sign your bullshit, but they see your humanity and they believe in your capacity to change. And so concretely, like what that looks like is it's often a long period of introspection and like conversation with trusted people. It involves actually like getting specific help for specific issues that you might have. So for example, if you're the kind of person who's an alcoholic or like a drug addict and you do this kind of shit when you're drunk and high, you may need to get sober first, or you may need to get some supports around that before you can even begin to promise that your behavior is going to change, right? You probably need some therapy, like whatever, what those resources are and like what those changes are gonna, it's gonna vary person to person and case to case. Then once you have actually started to make concrete change in your life and your behavior is changed in an ongoing way, that is where you make direct amends. Direct amends is when you reach out to the person that you have hurt and you ask for their consent in making direct amends to them. And if they are willing to receive that, then you meet with them. Or if they don't want to meet with you, you could do it over writing. And you express your sincere regret for what you did. You explain the changes that you've made. And you offer or ask if there's specific actions of repair that you can do. So in some cases, if you robbed somebody, you're probably gonna have to pay them back. You know what I mean? In other cases, there may not be concrete actions of repair. And it may just be your sincere regret and your changed behavior going forward. But something that is very, very important is that people who have done things that are wrong and who are making amends are still allowed to have boundaries. Being responsible does not mean that you have to do whatever it is that the person you hurt demands of you. Because sometimes what that person is asking or demanding of you might be inappropriate or might be crossing your boundaries, or might be trying to hurt you or dominate you or control you in some kind of way. You still remain an autonomous person with your own life, and you're allowed to have boundaries, and you're allowed to say no to what is being asked of you. That is different than what we hear in the accountability framework, because in the accountability framework, you will often hear that someone has not been accountable because they didn't do something that was asked of them of the person that they hurt. But actually, you are allowed to say no. And so if somebody makes a demand of you that is like, you know, I want you to give up your career, like you're not allowed to write books anymore, for example. And people do ask these things. It sounds funny, but it's actually a very common request. You can say no to that. And I think you should say no to that, because you are a full 3-dimensional complex person who's allowed to have a life, you know? So that is an important distinction. And it is possible for people who are asking for accountability to actually start doing abusive things under the guise of accountability. So it's important for people who are taking responsibility to still have appropriate boundaries and to know what is theirs and what is not. So I hope that answers the question.
I have a couple thoughts about this too, you know. Okay, so I've been accused of all kinds of shit that I didn't do. Here's something I did do that I was never accused of. When I was 19 and drinking, I was living with this girl. I used to steal from her all the time. When she was like asleep or like at work, I would like take money out of her purse or from her like change jar, and I would use it to buy booze, which is a really shitty thing to do to somebody. I was dating her, like this is my girlfriend, you know, and that sucks. That's something that, you know, you have to fucking take responsibility for, right? And I did. Years later, when I was sober, I apologized to her specifically for that, you know, and for other things that I had done in that relationship, because I was a fucking asshole and I sucked to date, right? You don't know about that. Nobody knows about that, except, well, now I just told you all, so you do know. But nobody knew about that except me and that girl and my sponsor, right? Because that process was not public. Because it's none of your fucking business what I did when I was 19. You know, I don't know you. You don't know me. And that process of taking accountability for something I did years ago is literally between me, the other person who's involved, and like God. You know, like those are the people involved. So that's what I think about accountability. It's like none of anybody's fucking business, really. I really dislike the culture that demands that this kind of thing be publicized as a kind of like crowdsourced tabloid entertainment on like Instagram, you know. It's like we treat like regular people like their lives are the lives of celebrities that we get to sort of like trawl through for salacious details, you know. But I'm not interested in that. I don't think it aligns very well with like a fucking a worldview that has integrity. Yeah, I'll just leave it at that.
Sorry, it's just one more thing I wanted to say, which is adding on to what Jay just said. In the 12 steps, we also have step 5. And step 5 is where you admit to yourself, another human being, and your higher power of your understanding, the exact nature of your wrongs. And so in that step, you tell someone all the worst shit you've ever done in your life. And the reason for this is that it is important for you to be honest about those things, and it is important to be witnessed in that honesty, and to have someone both seriously like witness all the shit that you did and also hold your humanity at the same time. It's a very important thing. But you do not put your fucking 5th step on the internet. You do not put your 5th step on the internet. That is not for public consumption. That is not for everybody to see, you know? And I agree with what Jay is saying. Like, we have completely eroded the concept of privacy in this social justice era, and we think that all the worst things that people have done is like everybody's business. And the reason that we think that is because we are still operating under the logic that like there are good and bad people, and knowing people's worst mistakes is like important so that we can like withdraw support from them, you know? But in reality, if I were to see all of your 5th steps, there'd be some crazy shit on there, man. It'd be fucking crazy. I don't need to fucking know that to like be able to talk to you guys and have a relationship with you. And I don't think that it is healthy. And the last thing I'll say about that, I know I'm going on a lot, the last thing I'll say about that is that by giving that shit to the internet And especially in the context of cancel culture and a culture that is so fucking unforgiving, what happens is that person will be permanently and publicly defined by the worst things that they have ever done. And being permanently and publicly defined by that, there's no fucking motivation to change. Because if I was told when I went into a 12-step meeting, for the rest of your life, you will always be seen as this drunk, crazy girl and no one will ever see more, why am I gonna put in all the work to change? There's no future. If you let people change and you don't define them by their past, like you give them the resources to deal with it, but you don't publicly and permanently define them by their past, then they are willing to put in the effort to change because they know they don't have to stay stuck there. That's it.
Nice. Okay, we have time for just one more question. I've been ignoring the people on the left or the right. I can't remember. Sure.
Hey guys. So yeah, going off what you just said, I remember very viscerally being frozen, hearing you're a native squat, wake up, no one will care what I'll do to you if I do whatever I want, because no one cares what happens to girls like you, native women specifically. And I remember them doing every awful, torturous thing they could do to me within an evening, and me being unable to move, frozen, you know, fight, flight, freeze mode, completely out of it. Something I never felt before. And then I remember leaving the next morning, and they woke up, and then they put on, like, what was it? It's just like a dumb 90s movie, and I like pretended it didn't happen, because for some reason I felt like it didn't, until I looked in the mirror and saw the black eye. But the point being that after that, I was coming up with this idea with some friends about, what if we tell them that if they go to rehab and they go to this program and that program and suggest it on their own accord, they have the choice to do that. And if not, then I might have to report it to police authorities. And they knew very well that I wasn't interested in that. My friends who were supporting me knew I wasn't interested in that, and I wasn't interested in that. But when they broke into my home 3 days afterwards, and knowing that they hoped I was there and that something very terrible could have happened to me if I was, I ended up having to report what happened. And going through all these, you know, forensic stuff and this and that, and this whole process of retelling and retelling and retelling what happened. And this was someone who I'd known for about 5 years and was my closest friend at the time, and had no red flags and nothing. They had never been canceled. They had never been, you know, how was I to know, right? So my question comes from the fact that, what do you do when someone that otherwise has been someone who's been very open and accepting and supportive of you commits an act that is incredibly vile and violent and life-changingly horrible, but you also don't trust the police? You're an Indigenous woman. Why would I, you know? Like, why do I want to get a rape kit from the white hospital that I'm too afraid to go to whenever I have, like, a issue, because I'm afraid they're going to tell me to go away because I want drugs, you know? Why would I? So it's like you're kind of stuck between, okay, either I lean into cancel culture and get the community to do the work for me and just cancel them, and then I can ignore it and be the good guy, or I could go to the police and do something against my fundamental values but feel safe and can sleep knowing that no one's going to break into my house and try to murder me. Or I could do something else, but I don't know what the something else is. And I've been asking around my community, and that's kind of the two options I'm being given from really intelligent, lovely people. So it's like, what do you do? And especially as someone Indigenous and as part of the community that is extra not believed when you experience terrible things.
So it's a really big, big question.
Yeah.
But I'll say a little bit, and then, you know, we can also talk about it more after. But okay, the first thing I want to say is that, you know, this work is not to condemn or shame survivors who are trying to do the best that they can given a fucked up situation. I myself have pressed charges. I went through a rape trial. I have been on the stand, etc. I understand that in crazy and violent situations, people are going to do whatever it is that they can do to try to survive that situation, you know? And being critical of cancel culture or the police is not a condemnation of survivors who are just trying to fucking survive, right? So I'll say that first and foremost. Secondly, you know, I feel like it sucks that those are the two options that are given to survivors, because I don't think that either of them actually fucking help. Because it's like, on the one hand, you know, because in my case, yes, like I did press charges, and like my ex-partner, he did go to jail. Guess what happened? He got out of jail and he continued to stalk me, and now he was fucking even more traumatized from jail and really mad that I pressed charges against him, right? Secondly, it wouldn't have even been realistic for me to use cancel culture against him, because if I had like made a website about him or something, what do you think he would have done? He would have been fucking enraged and he would have come after me, right? Because like violent men, when they are humiliated on the internet, usually respond violently to that, right? And the person they're most likely to take that rage out on is the person that they abuse. So it is not an effective strategy in terms of like domestic violence intervention. And so what is a good strategy for domestic violence intervention and rape intervention and all of these things? And the truth is that it's complicated and it's messy, right? Because it's like, it's what you were saying, Sarah, about like what is in our control and what is not in our control. It is not in our control if somebody wants to violently stalk and harass us and like try to fucking assault us, right? And like I lived with I had a stalker, like a violent stalker for a long time, and like what was I supposed to do? It sucks that I had to like, you know, watch my back when I was outside and like not like be able to go certain places because I knew that he was there. But I did kind of have to do those things for my safety. I think that what we need to be doing is like fucking resourcing the hell out of survivors, you know? I think that survivors should have access to what they need to get away from that shit, which comes through community. It also would come if we had better fucking social services, such as like housing and shit like that, because people not having access to housing is like fucking really puts them at extreme risk for more violence. But I think that, you know, we need communities that know how to do violence intervention, that know how to de-escalate violence, that know how to like stop a guy who's like trying to fucking attack a girl or whatever genders, but that's very often the case. And we need like to be building those skills rather than like cops or cancel culture. Because the thing is that we always are stuck on the question of cops and cancel culture, but like, is that even working anyway? It's not, you know? And so if we could spend even a fraction of the time just fucking talking about how to de-escalate, how to intervene, and how to resource survivors, I think that would be a lot more effective.
Yeah, just to add on to that, first of all, really fucking sorry that happened to you. That sucks. And when I think about that, the things that make me the most like pissed off on your behalf is that like, first of all, that like it feels like a burden for you, you know, in the situation where it's like you like in that situation you need, you know, support and like assistance, you know, and like I think that like a lot of the time what we're talking about. We're talking about like a large scale culture change that's like that takes time, you know. So it's like in any one particular moment, your obligations are to yourself and to keep yourself safe by whatever means are available to you. So it's like it's really just not your fault in any way that like the culture shift that you deserve hasn't happened yet, you know. And like so just like, you know, do what you got to do. And it also just makes me like, you know, like really fucking pissed off on your behalf that like there isn't more like community support, because it makes me think about stuff that we talked about on like the episode of the podcast that I was on, where I think about if like, you know, if all of the effort that is expended in especially like gigantic cancellation campaigns was instead redirected towards actually providing like tangible support for survivors, like imagine what kind of like I'm like they don't need you to go threaten somebody or like stop them from practicing with their band or whatever. They need you to do their laundry, you know? Like it's like these much less sexy things that we have to be able to do for survivors. They need their laundry done, they need like food, they need like safe places to go, they need like someone to fucking talk to, they need like a dog to cuddle with, you know, like that kind of stuff that like will actually make tangible changes. And like, yeah, the ideal situation, I think, you know, it's really fucking complicated, and I'm honestly just not smart enough to think of exactly what it would be, but it has something to do with there being like enough community support that you would be able to like rely on that kind of thing. And if that like hasn't happened yet, it's simply not your fault, you know?
Sorry, I'm just going to add one more thing. And yeah, first, just I'm so sorry that happened to you. I've supported many clients who've experienced sexual violence, and in terms of community and resourcing, you know, advocacy organizations that help walk alongside. I mean, absolutely, our justice legal systems are not set up for survivors whatsoever. But there are, you know, I'm not sure where you live, but there's Vancouver Rape Relief. WAVA's just rebranded. I can't remember their new name now, but there are specific organizations where you can have an advocate, recognizing that traditional systems don't often work well and be quite harmful in and of themselves. And these are folks who often have their own lived experience and have specific training and education in supporting survivors. So it's not a quick answer. It is complex, and there's just definitely not enough services, but potentially connecting with an advocacy organization just to get some support in helping you make your decisions, and that you're not alone, might be helpful.
Unfortunately, we're going to have to stop there if we can. But some of us are going to hang out if you want to interact with people, with your neighbors or whatever. But let's thank our speakers, and thank you for all coming. And do listen to the podcast. It's great.